In Laboratory Reddit, today's story is...
My wife cheated on me at her ex-mother-in-law's funeral, but what my 10-year-old stepdaughter did destroyed everything I believed about our family. Looking back, I don't think I will ever understand how someone can throw away 10 years of marriage in a single night, what Lucy later called a moment of weakness. For me it wasn't a simple moment, but a conscious choice, a deliberate betrayal. I never questioned when she told me she wanted to attend her ex's mother's funeral. It made sense. She had always been on good terms with the lady. She had never given me any reason to distrust her, and I had no reason to question her intentions. So I not only told her to go, I encouraged her to do so. That night, I waited for her. She had mentioned that the funeral might go on and she wanted to stay longer to offer support. It also seemed reasonable to me. Grief affects people in strange ways, and I assumed she was just trying to be considerate. But as the hours went by and the house remained silent, I felt that something was not right, that it was not just a funeral. Although at the time I dismissed this feeling as unfounded paranoia, when she finally arrived after midnight, I confirmed almost instantly that something was wrong. Lucy had always had that calm and serene air, even in tense situations. But that night, she avoided looking directly at me. When you spend so much time in a relationship, you start to notice patterns that tell you when things are not going well. It was as if she was trying too hard to act normal, and that made everything feel artificial. Then she confessed that she had been unfaithful to me. I didn't know what to say, because although I had this intuition that something negative had happened, I wasn't expecting a revelation of such magnitude. My mind went into survival mode, trying to find some way to deny this reality, but it was undeniable. At least she had the decency to admit it, that, in the middle of the funeral, she had had an encounter with her ex. I remember asking her how, why, what could have led her to this. She gave me all the typical excuses. She was emotionally vulnerable, she wasn't thinking straight, she regretted it as soon as it happened. But none of that made sense to me. People don't end up in private with someone by accident or wherever it happened. It wasn't a mistake, it was a decision she made, step by step, fully aware of what she was doing. I don't think she expected me to react with such indignation. Perhaps she thought I would cave in, or maybe she assumed that, since I had been understanding about her attending the funeral, I would be about this too. But that wasn't the case. They were completely different situations. She shed tears. She assured me that she still loved me, that she didn't want to lose everything we had built, that it was just a moment of weakness, and that she didn't even understand why she had done it. But one thing was clear to me: if she really hadn't wanted to lose me, she wouldn't have put everything at risk from the start. The argument went on until the early hours of the morning, and when it was over she packed a bag and left, saying she needed space and that she would stay temporarily with her sister. I didn't try to stop her, it simplified things for me. I think I was so stunned at that moment that I didn't even care where she was going. Making them simpler didn't mean they were easy at all. I barely ate and I barely slept. It wasn't just the betrayal of that night, but the doubt of whether this was a recurring thing or an isolated incident. The most painful thing was knowing that he had also built a life with his daughter. My stepdaughter was 14 when I married Lucy, and for the past decade she had been his father in every important way. I had financed her education, supported her unconditionally, and was even contributing financially to her wedding. She was my daughter in my heart, even if she wasn't by blood. And I had no idea how to communicate to her what her mother had done. Then came the decisive moment. I decided that I needed to talk to Lucy again to determine how we would proceed with the divorce. The divorce was clearly already on my mind, but I wanted at least to have a civilized conversation so that the whole process would be smooth. So I went to her sister's house, only to find that she was not there. Her sister seemed puzzled when I asked for her, saying that Lucy had left the day before, claiming that she was returning home to talk to me. But she hadn't returned. I had a feeling that there was only one place she could be, but I refused to believe it. Even so, I got in the car and drove there, and sure enough, her vehicle was parked in front of Anthony's residence. I cannot describe the feeling I experienced at that moment. It was not simply anger, it was something deeper. An empty, burning fury mixed with absolute disbelief that made me want to destroy something. She had betrayed me once and I swore it was a mistake. I promised it would never happen again. Yet there she was, less than a week later, at her house again. I didn't confront her. I didn't even stop the car. It made no sense. I had all the answers I needed. Instead, I returned home and waited. I don't know how long it was before she finally appeared. It was late. She seemed surprised to find me sitting in the living room. I asked her where she had been, and she hesitated. Then she lied. She said she had been shopping. I didn't even have to press the point. The guilt was already on her face, like it had been that night of her confession. I told her what I had seen, how I had passed Anthony's house, how I had seen his car parked there. He sought another justification, claiming that he had left some belongings there and needed to retrieve them. But by that point, he had already lost the capacity to feel anything but coldness and detachment. He tried to beg me for repeatedly that he wanted to make things right. But if it was impossible to repair before that afternoon, with the new lie there was nothing left to do. Divorce was always the main option in all this. But at least I had expected her to show some remorse the first time. But no, she could just carry on lying and deceiving me directly as if I were worthless to her. She cried as she tried to persuade me, but the decision had definitely been made. I went up to the room, closed the door behind me and didn't come back down. I had no idea how much worse things would get. From the moment Lucy admitted what she had done, I knew that my stepdaughter, my daughter, as I had always thought of her, would be devastated. I couldn't bear the thought of breaking her heart in the same way that mine had been shattered, not when she had her whole future ahead of her, not when she was planning her wedding. So I decided, at least for now, to keep it a secret. I knew the divorce was inevitable. I knew the life we had built as a family was falling apart, but I didn't want to involve her in this, not yet. I thought maybe I could tell her after the wedding. I could hold out until then, pretend that things weren't as bad as they really were. She deserved that, but events didn't unfold as planned. Lucy had left the house after our last argument, and I wasn't sure when or if she would return. I spent the day in a fog, unable to concentrate on anything other than everything that had happened. I had barely begun to process my own pain when, unexpectedly, my stepdaughter walked through the front door. I barely had a chance to speak before she started attacking me. She told me she couldn't believe I had abandoned her mother like that I was being cruel and punishing her mother for something beyond my control. She wasn't asking for an explanation. She had already formed her own opinion about what had happened. I just stood there, numb, unable to utter a word. To my stepdaughter, I was throwing away this marriage because of a single easily forgivable mistake. I was acting as if Lucy had forgotten to close the door on her way out, not as if she had been intimately with the same man she had described as a monster. Yes, her divorce was quite complicated and she called him a monster because of all the experiences she had with him. I had spent 10 years raising this child, 10 years being the father she never had, and now, in less than a minute, she had decided that none of that mattered. She had already chosen her side, and it wasn't mine. I wanted to ask her if she even knew the truth, if Lucy had told her everything, how she had betrayed me, how she had supposedly gone out to clear her head, but in reality had returned directly to Antony. But I doubted whether it made sense to discuss it with her. If she knew what had happened and still supported her mother, it was useless to show her another perspective. Finally, I managed to formulate a question, something like, "Do you even know what he did?" And she confirmed that she didn't care. She said that her mother had already apologized and that I was being irrational over a simple mistake with the father of her daughter, that I was destroying this family because I couldn't accept an accidental infidelity, that I was behaving childishly instead of trying to fix things. It broke my soul. I don't know how long I stood there, just looking at her, feeling nothing but emptiness. I spent days agonizing over how to tell her. I wanted to protect her, to keep her from being caught in the middle of this mess, and yet there she was, acting as if I had committed something unforgivable. It was then that I realized I had already lost her. I could have spent hours explaining, I could have told her everything, but she wouldn't have listened to me. She had already made up her mind before she walked through that door. Lucy must have told her just enough to turn her against me. Perhaps she had distorted the story, presenting herself as a victim. Perhaps my stepdaughter simply preferred to believe her mother, because accepting another version meant admitting that everything was falling apart. Either way, the result was the same. She was defending an infidel, and I was no longer her father. She turned to leave, muttering all the while how disappointed she was in me, how she never thought I would be that kind of person. And then, quickly, she was gone. She didn't even look back. I had lost Lucy and now I had lost her too. I don't know if I will ever understand that defending infidelity is wrong. But one thing is clear, I will not finance her wedding. Not anymore. I spent the last few days regretting my marriage, but somehow this was more painful. I had expected Lucy's betrayal to hurt me, but somehow I had maintained a naive hope that my stepdaughter, whom I considered as my daughter, would still see me as part of the family. That even if I lost my wife, I wouldn't lose her too. But I lost her, and in the worst possible way. I had tried to protect her from this. I had planned to stay so that her wedding would not be overshadowed by these events. I had been a better father than her biological father and her mother, but this is how they repay me. But I wasn't going to stand by passively and wait for everything to get worse. I picked up my phone and started to cancel everything, the wedding payments, the venue deposit, all the financial commitments that carried my name. There were non-refundable expenses. But I fought for those outstanding payments or recoverable deposits. I had to share part of my story with the suppliers to gain their understanding, and that was well received, so I got most of my money back. Then I called my stepdaughter's fiancé. I clearly informed him that I would no longer be funding the wedding. I apologized for backing out, for doing it at the last minute. I explained my reasons and my side of the story. But he seemed to know it already, because he didn't respond much. He just let out a brief, tired sigh and muttered something vague, as if avoiding getting involved. I waited a moment, expecting him to say something more, but when it became clear that he wouldn't, I hung up. No one in that family seems to care about my situation, so there's no point in doing something as generous as paying for their wedding. Lucy came home later that day. He did so as if he thought we could still talk and sort things out. I could already tell that she thought I would calm down, that this was just a bad patch that we could get through. She started to talk, saying that she didn't want things to end like this, that she recognized she had made a mistake, but that we had too much history to throw it all away. I told her that there was nothing left to save. I had already consulted a lawyer, the divorce papers would be ready in a few days. She was momentarily stunned, then anger took over. She started saying that I was rushing in instead of waiting for the dust to settle, that I was acting like a capricious child incapable of seeing a simple mistake for what it was, a mistake. To make me feel guilty, she claimed that leaving her also meant leaving her daughter, which was unfair of me. I told her that I never wanted my stepdaughter to be caught up in this. I had planned to wait until after the wedding before saying anything, but she was the one who told her. She was the one who distorted the story before I even had a chance to explain. She was the one who made sure that my stepdaughter hated me before I could even get a word in. I asked her, "Did you really hate me all that time? Did my stepdaughter only tolerate me because I paid the bills, or was her mother's manipulation enough to erase 10 years of love and memories in a single conversation?" Lucy didn't answer. Perhaps because she didn't know, or perhaps because she knew and simply didn't want to admit it. Lucy tried to argue, trying to say that it wasn't too late, that I could still reconcile with my stepdaughter. I told him that I wouldn't pay for the wedding. Lucy stormed out after that, furious. She probably went to talk to her daughter to find a way to solve this problem. But even if they try to persuade me, it's all canceled now. There's no venue for the event, no flowers, no food, nothing. We've all made decisions, some better than others. But here's the thing, it's time for us all to face the consequences of our choices. Addition for those who ask why the biological father was a monster to my wife. Their marriage was complicated in many ways, but the worst happened during the divorce, when the father tried to turn the daughter against my wife. He succeeded temporarily, but when it all came crashing down because the lies couldn't be sustained, both my wife and my stepdaughter began to detest him. Not too surprising considering what we've seen so far. That's why I think they now see their ex and their father in me, and are looking for some kind of revenge on me. I don't think I deserve it, however, but it's what I have to face. Update 1: I thought I was done with this disaster, but apparently the disasters weren't done with me. A few days after my update, after informing Lucy that I was withdrawing my support for the wedding completely, I received a call from my stepdaughter's fiancé. I didn't know if they had sent him or if he had decided to contact me on his own initiative, but I knew it was about the wedding. More specifically, that I should fund it again. So when I answered, I was expecting a persuasive speech, but it was nothing like that. I quickly realized that it had nothing to do with the money. She informed me that the engagement had been broken off. She explained that she could no longer deal with so much drama, that the way my stepdaughter reacted to the whole situation, defending her unfaithful mother, made her realize that she was not the person with whom she wanted to share the rest of her life. Apparently, after I withdrew the funds for the wedding, she lost control not only with me, but also with him. She blamed him for not defending her and accused him of not trying hard enough to convince me to reconsider. She started arguing with him over nothing, and finally, he had enough. So he left, and that's how the wedding was canceled. Technically it was already canceled, but they could plan another one later if they could find someone to pay for it. But here's the twist, they both blamed me for it. He didn't say it openly, but it was clear that he was upset with me for withdrawing from the wedding. And my stepdaughter was absolutely convinced that this was my responsibility. She thought that if I had simply forgotten the past and continued to finance it, everything would have been perfect. That if only he had acted like a father, none of this would have happened. But I am not her father. Her father was intimately with my wife during her mother's funeral. I guess everyone deals with grief differently. Some mourn the deceased and others become intimate with their ex-wife from a toxic relationship. I almost laughed, because from his perspective, being a father didn't mean love, respect, or caring for each other. It meant being a submissive and writing checks for the daughter of his unfaithful wife. He should sign the check as Mr. Submissive, or just submissive is fine. At least I've regained my sense of humor during this period between my first publication and this update. I didn't argue with him. I just said, "I'm sorry things ended up like this, but this is between the two of you, I have no responsibility." Then I hung up. I hoped that would be it and that a phone call would be the most I would have to face. But I was very wrong, as was demonstrated shortly afterwards. A day later, there was a knock on my front door. I opened it to find my stepdaughter, Lucy, and Anthony, the ex-husband. From their obvious anger, I could already guess that this was related to the wedding. Lucy started first, yelling at me about how I had ruined our daughter's future, how revenge blinded me, and how I was using my stepdaughter to carry it out. That I couldn't see that I was destroying her chance of being happy. I didn't say a word. I just looked at my stepdaughter, waiting for her to speak, and when she did, it didn't help to improve the situation, it made it considerably worse. She looked me straight in the eye and said that all this was my fault. That if I had been a better person, if I had acted like a father, she wouldn't be in this predicament, that I was the one who had destroyed this family, and that I was being selfish by not forgiving her mother. I was being selfish, according to her, because what happened was a moment of vulnerability, of losing someone important. It was only physical, and my wife still loved me. That should matter to me. But I only thought about having her exclusively for myself, and that made me controlling. Well, it's fortunate that the wedding was cancelled for her fiancé, because it's a beautiful mentality for his wife-to-be. I allowed him to let off steam. I allowed him to express everything he needed to say, and then, when he finally stopped, I offered him the only relevant truth. I said to him, "It seems quite controlling that you don't care about your mother's infidelity and that you want my money." I also had a moment of weakness and decided to cancel the wedding payments. "You should forgive me." I said it in anger, but before she could reply, and because it was a response I wasn't interested in, I spoke to her more seriously. I laid it all out. I told her that for 10 years, I had raised her as my own, that I had provided her with everything a father gives his child. Not just financial resources, but time, love, support, and guidance, none of which the man standing behind them had done. And yet, when her mother betrayed me with her biological father, and I refused to tolerate it, she dismissed me as if I were worthless. And now, after all that, she had the audacity to stand before me and behave as if I were obliged to continue playing the role of father. No, I fulfilled my paternal role perfectly, but she did not fulfill the role of daughter, and that led us to this situation. If you had had this conversation with your mother instead of me, you would now have your wedding and your fiancé. But your fiancé ran away when he realized that marrying you meant preparing the divorce papers, because sooner or later you would betray him with an excuse as frivolous as your mother's. This last sentence was what provoked the reaction of his biological father, as Anthony was not willing to ignore him. He tried to intervene. He tried to adopt an intimidating stance and act as if he had something important to say and command respect. I silenced him quickly. I told him to be quiet, because he was nothing more than a deplorable infidel who ruined his own marriage and then contributed to ruining mine, and that he had no right to come into my house and behave as if he had any say in my life. He blushed intensely, but did not insist. She must have seen in my eyes that I was not in the mood for her nonsense. Pretty cowardly of her, but until then she had allowed the women to talk alone without intervening, so I wasn't surprised. Lucy, however, intensified her stance. She declared that they would not leave until I took responsibility for the damage caused, that I at least owed my daughter an apology. And that apology had to be accompanied by financial compensation, because the damage I caused would not be repaired with words alone. It had been a long time since I had experienced such laughter. I had to pay for my actions, but she could justify infidelity with simple words. I asked them to leave or I would call the authorities, because I didn't want either of them on my property. Lucy and I had a prenuptial agreement. She was the one who insisted on it. She had been wronged in her first marriage and didn't want to risk losing resources if things went wrong. Now, that prenuptial agreement was the only thing that prevented her from getting a single penny from me. I have Anthony to thank for that. I have lost a lot in this period, but I am coming to understand that much of what I have lost was better kept lost. Update 2: My stepdaughter's fiancé has run away. He has been moving away since he called off the wedding and is probably 3 states away by now. Figuratively running away, of course, but he has put as much distance as possible between himself and my stepdaughter. And that's my update. Thanks for reading. No, there's more to tell. There's a little more. Thanks to the prenuptial agreement, I have kept my house, my savings, and all my belongings, while my ex has kept his, which are few. He was never inclined to save, perhaps because during his relationship with his ex he controlled all her resources. That explains why he used to spend excessively with me, because he felt free. This is one of the reasons why she did not finance her daughter's wedding herself, apart from the fact that, as the father, so to speak, I was expected to pay for the bride's wedding, according to tradition. But I have researched this tradition and it makes no mention of infidelities, so I made an executive decision because there was no precedent for my situation. Which reminds me, Because I'm sure I'll receive comments indicating that there is no written tradition on the matter, I must respond to one specific comment. No, I did not request any genetic testing because she is my stepdaughter. That much is clear from the start. What is going on in this forum that everyone is requesting paternity tests? Do you invest in the shares of these companies? Is there something I'm not aware of? Should I invest? In any case, I found it funny because they detect infidelity and request a paternity test. I wonder if they do the same in divorces without children. It would be entertaining to read about it. My ex tried to resume his relationship with Anthony, so it wasn't just physical, there was something more. Not only did he seek physical comfort that night, but it all ended the same as the first time for them. It wasn't easier to communicate that I wanted to try again with his ex than to wait for a funeral. What is Anthony's deceased mother thinking if she is witnessing all this from wherever she is? My stepdaughter, at least, has redirected all her anger towards her ex-fiancé. She has made a public statement claiming that he only married her for her money. But it wasn't her money, it was mine. What a lucky escape for that man. I hope that one day he finds out and sends me at least a basket of fresh fruit. I don't know. It might be a nice gesture. I also accept other types of food. By the way, I'm feeling hungry, so I want to finish this and go for a snack. I'm going to miss this community, although not the requests for genetic tests. Issue 3. I have received a private message that is not the equivalent of a fruit basket, but it does contain apologies and thanks for having helped him with my stepdaughter, who I should now refer to as ex-stepdaughter. He also informed me that he made a post similar to my stepdaughter's, indicating that she lacked her own resources, and so far she was winning in terms of the number of likes.